What's up guys, Ben here with Digital Trigger Technologies. Today we're going to dive into the install. If you're watching this video, I hope you're as excited as me to do the install. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and dive on in to installing your DigiTrigger Ultra. Alright, so part one is just going to be familiarizing yourself with the grip set. Okay, so let's go ahead and do a little unbox here. Alright, inside is of course your DT Ultra. And just so you know, each one of these is hand fit and hand checked, okay, before it comes to you. We really make sure to try and take our time with everything so it's perfect for you out of the gate. Okay, so of course your DT grip set is going to be the first thing. You're going to have the old trusty mechanical trigger group. You're going to have your grip screw. And you're going to have a couple extra parts, namely the Detent is the primary extra part. All right, so let's go ahead and let's take that grip apart. Now I've got another one here, okay, and this is going to be the actual install grip for the lower here. So the first thing you have to do is you got to remove your battery cap, all right? So let's go ahead, it just threads on. Let's take that battery cap off, okay? And while we're talking about that battery cap, let's do a little note on batteries. Okay, Duracells and ProCells are still kind of our factory go-to battery, okay? So these are your two main guys right here, okay? Now, we have been doing a lot of testing, and we do have another recommendation, which this is now kind of our #1 factory battery, and that's the lithium ultralife. All right, we've been testing it. It is far superior to the alkaline batteries. You get way more battery life, almost double. And the main thing is, depending on the operating temperature, that will survive the extremes, okay? The alkalines, if you get too hot or too cold, they will die on you. So this is kind of our #1 factory recommendation, but always have some extra Duracells with you because they are still great batteries, all right? Now, when installing the battery, it no longer matters what the orientation is. So the polarity is irrelevant, okay? So you guys doing night stuff and everything like that, you don't have to worry about making sure that that's correct, all right? You just drop that battery in, okay? It has a little bit of a pop-up feature there. That's fine. It's not going to seat itself perfectly until you thread the battery cap on, and that's to be able to grab it when you're doing a battery change. If it does get a little snug, you can always just give your grip a little smack or really just take your whole lower and shake it a little bit. It will fall to the bottom and you can remove it. Now what I'm going to do is, for the install, I'm actually going to stage the battery right now. I'm just going to put a battery in it. We're going to take apart this grip and make sure that everything checks out. Okay, so like I said, you got to take the battery cap off. In this case, I'm going to actually bottom it out so I can remove the grip halves. Your grip halves will not remove unless that battery cap is taken off or at least bottomed out. All right, so the first, and there is an order of operations here. All right, the first thing you have to do is take the left grip cover off. Okay, and the way you do that is right in here where the mode selector is, there's a groove. So you want to actually push it out. Now it is a snug fit from the factory, so if you need to get some kind of non-marring, maybe a little screwdriver and use the plastic back end to put some extra pressure on it. But this one is pretty good and broken in. All right, so I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to pull that left grip cover off. Okay, and you will notice here that the right grip cover, okay, does have a little set screw in the back bottom there. All right, retaining it. And this is to keep everything snug, and it's also during battery changes to make sure that your grip covers are really tight. Okay, so we have your handy dandy in the box DT tool. All right, now this DT tool is going to do everything. All right, and it does have the 1/16 hex driver. All right, so all you're going to do is you're going to go ahead, you're just going to back that screw out a couple turns. All right, it's not much, and that's going to allow the right grip cover to pop off, all right? And now this is when you just want to familiarize yourself with the grip, okay? You just want to understand its components, and we're going to go through them in detail, of course, and mainly you just want to be familiar with how to put the grip covers on and take them off, okay? So right now, just mess with it. Everything's pretty tough. You're not going to break anything, all right? Just familiarize yourself with it, and we'll go into detail on how to put it on later. But essentially, there's two dovetails up top, all right? They need to find their way home, and then you can essentially pop the grip in. And like I said, we're going to go through in much more detail. This one's nice and tight. Sometimes you have to work it a little bit, and you will actually hear an audible pop when it comes in, okay? And that's actually me pushing down on this point. Like I said, we'll get into more detail when we do the final assembly. All right, so first things first, just familiarize yourself with your grip. And like I said, you're not gonna break anything here. All right, all these parts are aluminum. They're really tough. And the more you take them apart and reassemble them, the better they break in. And it's gonna be easier when you're either in the field and you wanna make an adjustment or something like that. All right, so now let's go ahead. Now that we have our grip set, we're gonna give it a quick test to make sure that everything works. All right, and we do all this from the factory. All right, but it is good for you to do it at home just to make sure everything is still good. The main test we're gonna do now is we're just gonna make sure that the grip power's on. So again, make sure you have a fresh battery in. And all you're gonna do is you're gonna go ahead and your on-off lever, you're just gonna push it, okay? And the power up LED should power up for about 2 seconds, and that tells you that your grip is active, you have a good battery, and you can proceed with your install. All right, so for part 2, we're gonna go ahead and dive into the install, all right? Now, I have gone ahead and I have already stripped this lower. I've taken the mechanical trigger group out, all right? There's a lot of videos on YouTube for that if you wanna know how to do that. I'm guessing that you've already done that a few times if you're installing your own digital trigger. If not, this is the mechanical trigger section, so just basically see how I put the trigger in, and essentially you're reversing that to take your trigger group out. All right, so step number 1, all right? You have your trigger wire. All right, now your trigger wire is the linkage between your mechanical trigger group and your digital control unit. All right, this is kind of the secret sauce here. So it's going to be the first component to go in. The second component is your T-bolt, all right, your grip screw here. All right, now that is what's going to hold the grip on. All right, so this step is fairly easy, but conceptually, I want you guys to understand what's happening. Okay, it's going to make it much easier to do your install if you know exactly what's going on. So I've got some parts here staged for you. We got the trigger group, okay? So here's your trigger, all right? And it looks very much like a mechanical trigger. Now, if you notice, use my DT tool as a pointer here, there is a slot in the back of that trigger, all right? Now, that slot is actually going to correspond to the shorter leg of the trigger linkage here, all right? So just so you know what's happening, this is going to be in this slot, and this is going to control the position of your trigger slider. And it's going to control when you fire, and it is going to link your trigger, your mechanical trigger, to your digital control unit. And we'll dive into how that works here shortly, but let's go ahead and let's start the mechanical trigger group. So the first thing you do is you take your trigger wire and you just drop it in. And we've tried to make these parts to where they make sense. It will not go in wrong. The longer leg will not actually go into the grip screw bore there. All right, so you go ahead, you drop that in, and you can see that just there. Now the grip screw has a valley cut into it, all right? Now this is, again, you can't put this in unless it is oriented correctly. So all you're gonna do is you're gonna find that valley, okay? And you're gonna go ahead and screw that grip screw in. Not too bad. And what you're going to do is you're going to bottom it out on your lower, and then you're going to turn it back around. And now the trigger wire here is going to be on the left side of your lower, okay? If this is the front of the lower, we got your left side here, all right? This is what is going to link your mechanical trigger to your digital control grip. So that is step 1. Now this next step is the trick, all right? This is the fun one. And we are going to go ahead, we're going to drop in our trigger. So take your trigger pin, and we are going to link those two up. All right, now this is going to be the trickiest part of the mechanical trigger group install. But it's not too bad, and actually most customers are able to do it first try. So a note on your trigger pin, all right, the groove is going to insert from the left side, okay? So if you're looking at the lower, the groove is going to be on the right side in its final resting position. All right, and the reason for that is the legs of the hammer spring are going to retain that trigger pin that way. All right, so when it's living inside your lower, you need to make sure that groove is exposed so your trigger pins stay retained. All right, so let's go ahead and let's link the two up. So what you're going to do is, what I like to do, just so we understand conceptually what's happening, is we're going to take that trigger wire and we're going to hook it into the groove. All right, so the first thing I do is I just drop the trigger in. All right, just drop it in just like it's a standard mechanical trigger. Now, this is the trick, okay? What you want to do is rotate this about 45 degrees. And now, and this is going to be a little tricky because I'm going to show you how I do it and then we'll show you the internals. But what I actually do is I control the trigger wire with my fingers and I rotate it into the groove. All right, so all I'm doing is I'm pushing this up. You can actually you can see it, and I rotate it into the groove, and now it is actually seated in the groove. So if we get a close up there, you can see how it is sitting in the groove of the trigger. All right, and what is happening there is the trigger is now linked to your trigger wire, and you can give it a test before you do everything else. You can move the trigger, and you can actually see the trigger wire is attached to it because it is also correspondingly moving with the trigger pull. All right, now that is the hardest part. Everything else is exactly what you're used to. All right, now if this is your first time doing a mechanical trigger, you can use the DT multi-tool here to align everything. All right, it is the correct bore. Now for the sake of the video, I am not going to do that. I'm just going to go ahead and use the pin itself, but you can use that if this is your first time and you're learning the trigger group. All right, so the next component that's going to go in is going to be your main sear, okay? And of course, what's going to follow that is the disconnector. Now, the easiest way to do this is in 2 steps, all right? So I'm going to cue up my disconnector. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to drop it right into that trigger valley. And just so you guys know what's happening there, the main sear and the trigger are 2 separate components. So this is going to drop on, and it's going to be just like a mil-spec trigger group except for in 2 components. All right, so we're just going to go ahead and drop this onto the trigger. So I'm going to do that here, all right? And don't worry, like I said, everything's real tough. And now again, the groove is going to go to the right, so I'm going to install it from this way. And like I said, you can use your trigger pin, but the trick to me is I hold the component down with 1 finger. And by the way, this works for any mechanical trigger group. All right, we've done a lot of installs with customers, and so we have a few tricks we're going to show you guys. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to guide the sear while putting pressure on the trigger pin. And that's really going to help find it. All right, you see how it just popped in like that? And like I said, take your time with this. If you do need some kind of little mallet or something to tap it, you can do that. But honestly, you can do it with your fingers. It's not too bad. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to back that trigger pin out just enough to clear space for the disconnector. All right, that's kind of the easy part there. If you back that pin all the way out, now your sear is going to come up and you have to align 2 components instead of 1. So I'm just going to back it out just enough, and you can see that I've made some room for the disconnector, all right, in that main sear. And again, just like with that sear, I'm going to go ahead, and remember the hook goes forward, all right, forward being towards the magwell. I'm going to hold the disconnector, and I'm going to position it with my top hand while putting pressure with my thumb on the trigger pin. And this is kind of the trick that's going to help align everything. So I'm just going to, again, pressure with the 2 fingers. I'm going to find it, and thank goodness, first try on camera. All right, now your trigger is set. Okay, and I'm going to give it a quick test and make sure that the trigger does indeed move, the trigger wire there, and it does. Okay, so I know that the trigger group is perfectly installed and linked up to my trigger wire. Now next is the hammer, and of course guys, make sure you have eye protection because we have springs and tension here. And again, this is almost identical to a standard mil-spec hammer. Okay, you got to make sure that your spring is in this orientation here to where the flat side of the spring is even with the hammer. Okay, it's actually going to push down this way. All right, and if your spring does have a little bit of an angle to it, make sure that this is not reversed around this way. All right, a lot of people, correct orientation. Let me go ahead and show you the incorrect orientation that people will do. Now from the factory, these come correctly installed, but a lot of guys like to install performance springs. That is a thing. This would be backwards. If you see the spring like this, it is backwards. All right, it needs to be oriented in this direction for it to be correct. Now, with everything, there's a trick, right? What you want to do with the hammer is, just so you know, the legs of the hammer spring here, they are going to sit on the outer groove, and on your trigger, there is another groove here. And so what's going to happen is that is going to sit on the left leg of the hammer spring, and that's going to push down on your trigger, providing forward pressure on your trigger. Now the trick here is what I do is I hold the hammer in place like this so it doesn't pop out and smack me right in the face, and I put one finger on one side of the hammer and the other on the other side of the hammer leg. So you're holding it like this right here, okay? And then we're going to do the exact same thing that we did with the sear and disconnector. I'm going to hold my lower, and I'm going to provide, and this is the trick, and this works with any trigger group, I'm going to provide downward pressure with my thumb using my finger in the mag well to hold everything in place. All right, and that is going to make it much easier than trying to align it, trying to hammer a pin. You're just going to hold it, and this way you can actually move the hammer up and down to correctly position it. All right, so now I'm going to take my hammer pin, and this you may need to use a little mallet or something. These are pretty well broken in, so I've aligned them, and I've pushed my hammer pin in. All right, work the hammer a little bit until the trigger pins are flush, and now my mechanical trigger group is installed, and we are ready for the next step. Okay, so this is part 3 of your digital trigger install. All right, and now what we're going to do, all right, now that the mechanical trigger group is all installed, we are going to install the digital grip set. All right, so the first thing we have to do is uninstall the trigger slider. All right, so there is a single screw to take it off, and we will reinstall it. That's one of the last steps. So your 1/16 driver, you're just going to take off the retaining screw. Make sure you don't lose that. I'm going to set it on the table there. And you can actually use some needle nose pliers. You guys that have some big old bear claws may want to use some needle nose pliers. There is a little tab you can grab it. I'm just going to go ahead, use my hand, and just kind of work it off of there. And that is your trigger slider. That is the beauty that is going to link your mechanical trigger group to your digital control unit here. So I'm just going to go ahead and set that down. All right, we'll dive into it shortly. All right, so now we are going to go ahead and we're going to put our digital control grip on, okay? And the easiest way to do this is first, we need to understand exactly what's being linked up, all right? Your trigger wire here is going to find its way through, and I'm going to use the tool as a pointer here, this little slot here, all right? Now that slot is what's going to allow this to link up to your trigger slider. So there's, of course, with everything there's a trick, all right? All you have to do is go at a slight angle here, and we're going to stage our grip here in a second, and you're going to find that little valley, or that little slot. There you go, you can see that. And that's how you're going to align it prior to putting your grip in place. All right, so let me go ahead and let me stage the grip. Now this is going to be the trickiest part of the whole install right here, right? And that is putting this grip onto the lower. But there are some shortcuts to make it easier. So here is your grip screw, all right? It's actually a little castle nut. And what we want to do to make this whole thing easier is we want to stage this. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put it in position over the solenoid here, all right? And now, and this is where your tool really comes in handy because you can move things around, all right? What I'm going to do is, here's the crazy trick. I'm going to hold it in place and flip it upside down. All right, now what that did is the solenoid drops to the bottom and actually holds this in place, all right? And that's going to be the trick so things aren't falling out and making the install tough on you. All right, so go ahead, stage that. I'm going to go ahead and put that down. And now we're ready to link the grip to the lower receiver. So to make things easier, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to flip this upside down. I'm going to insert my selector into the bore. All right, and now there are two components that physically link the control unit to the lower, and that is your sear ram, okay? It's going to go into the grip screw, and it has a very specific orientation. Okay, the round, the curved portion needs to go into the trigger pocket. So we're going to go ahead and insert it, curved portion, into the grip screw. All right, and then of course, your detent, which I have it right here, your detent is going to go into the safety bore. Your detent is going to go into the safety bore. Now you have to use our detent, okay? You have to use our rounded detent. Do not try and use a factory detent. It's not going to work. All right, so I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to just drop that in there, position it. You can push it down. Whoa. You can push it down if you need to with your screw or with your DT tool. All right, now your lower is staged. And just so you understand what's happening there, the detent is going to push your detent ram, and it's either going to do nothing or it's going to turn the unit on. And you can hear it turning the unit on. That is how your lower physically turns on your digital control grip. All right, so you need to make sure that's down. And then your sear ram, that is going to be controlled, that is going to be run by your solenoid, and that is going to actually fire the gun digitally when you pull the trigger. All right, so the trick here is to keep the lower upside down so everything stays in. All right, very important you do that. That is going to be, and normally I have it towards me, but for the video, I'm going to kind of put it towards you and do everything from the back end. All right, so now what you're going to do, you're going to put your grip on. All right, and we got to do our little trick here where we put the wire into the little valley here. And see, notice how that sear ram wants to come out. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure it's retained. There we go. Now it is oriented, okay? And now I'm going to keep things upside down. And I'm going to align the grip onto the grip screw. All right, and now very important here. I'm going to turn it around so you guys can see it. Your T-bolt there, all right, the grip is keyed, okay? So if you see here, it is keyed, right? Your T-bolt needs to align with those slots. So you just want to make sure that it is aligned by pushing and making sure it's in the correct orientation. All right, and now it's a whole lot easier if you're not trying to show the camera what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and align it with the DT tool. And now this is the fun part, okay? Once that T-bolt is aligned, you are going to thread your castle nut onto the screw. And this is going to be done incrementally, all right? So I'm going to go ahead and use my DT tool to thread it on, all right? And work it onto the screw, all right? Just a few rotations at a time, all right? You can kind of shake things around, make sure everything's aligned. Here I'm making sure my T-screw is aligned so that the grip falls down onto the lower. And then I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to thread on the bolt. And take your time with this. You really can't mess it up. It's already aligned. You're going to push it down. There we go. Things are snapping into place. And just slowly work that castle nut. All right? Until everything bottoms out. And this, like I said, this is the toughest part of the whole install right here, is making sure this castle nut is retaining your grip onto your lower. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to rotate and torque it until it stops. That's it. Okay, I just want it to stop and make sure that the grip is somewhat snug. All right, and we're going to do a function test to make sure everything is perfect. Next, we're going to go ahead and do a function test to make sure that everything works. All right, so of course, make sure your battery is installed. And I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to show you the close-up. We're going to turn our selector from safe to fire, and notice how the spring pressure is what causes the safety selector to click into place. But notice that the on-off lever doesn't actually activate the grip. That's what you want. If it does activate it, that means you want to put a shorter detent in, and there are extra detents enclosed in your box. Now, when you go to digital, notice it does power the unit up, right? And that is correct. That's what you want to see. When you go to digital, you want to make sure your on-off lever is positively activating that switch, all right? Now, we're going to go ahead and leave it on, all right? Make sure your hammer is forward. We're going to test to make sure that the trigger mode switch also works. So out of the gate, it needs to do nothing because I'm not on the grip safety. So the next check is I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to depress the grip safety, and now I'm going to hit the lever, and the solenoid should energize. All right, that means your grip is good to go. Last test before we finish the install is I'm going to go ahead physically with my finger, I'm going to hit the mode switch, okay? And you should see those LEDs that indicate that you've switched modes, they should oscillate. All right, now we know our digital control grip is functioning, it's installed. So what you want to do is you want to go ahead and tighten up that castle nut. Now here's how you do it. We're going to go ahead and we're going to put this to mechanical. All right. We're going to pull the trigger all the way. And what that is doing is it is allowing the CRAM to fall into place and the solenoid to clear. So what you want to do is you want to hold the solenoid down. If I can use my tool here, hold the solenoid down, pull that trigger all the way, all right? And if you notice, the CRAM now clears. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass my tool all the way through, okay? And this is also a final function check, all right? Your hammer should not be able to be retained back. When this tool is through that castle nut, your sear should clear the hammer completely, and that tells you that everything is in spec, all right? And if you're the one customer out of 1,000 that doesn't work for, just give us a call and we'll send you a shorter CRAM. All right, now all you do is, with it snug, it's 1/8 of a turn. So you cannot over torque because of our tool. All right, that is by design because people love to add extra torque to things these days. So just go ahead, 1/8 of a turn. All right, that's it. And now pull your tool out. Your grip is torqued into place and you are ready to do the remainder of the install. All right. So again, make sure your battery door is either off. I'm just going to go ahead and take it off, remove the battery, and there is an order of operations here. All right, we're going to go ahead. The right grip half is going to go in first. Okay, so again, you've already kind of messed with the grip. You're familiar with it. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to line up the dovetails. All right, make sure they're both aligned. And the trick here is once you align the dovetails, I like to put a little pressure to make sure the grip half stays in the dovetails. And then I'm going to take and I'm going to apply pressure to the back of the grip and I'm going to just kind of press it in place. And it'll kind of, you kind of hear it click a little bit. It'll click in place just a little bit. The snag point is right here at the interface. You want to push pressure right there if it's not clicking into place, especially if it's a brand new grip. Everything's still going to be really tight from the factory. All right, and now what I do is, I'm going to go ahead and put my battery back in. I'm going to put the battery cap back on. And this perfectly positions that right grip half. Okay, now notice there is a little set screw from the beginning. You're going to go ahead, and this doesn't take any torque. Notice that our tool doesn't have a really big handle, and that's so you can't over torque anything. All right, so now that right grip half is perfectly positioned, and all we have to do is the trigger slider. All right. This is the final step, and this is what's going to link your digital trigger to your digital control unit. All right, now like I said, you can hold it with needle nose pliers on the little tab here. That kind of makes it easier. But just so you understand what's happening, this part has a slider, this slider right here. Okay, and it has an adjustment screw, a single adjustment screw. And you can adjust that with a number 0 flathead or use our DT tool. And you can adjust the position. And what that's doing is it is controlling exactly where your trigger pull activates. We're going to go back to digital here. Where that trigger wire activates your trigger lever and fires your digital control, and fires your gun. Okay? So this is a bit of a trick. You just have to make sure the trigger wire is straight, and you're just going to align the bore with that trigger wire. All right, so the easiest way to do this is put this flat on the table. Make sure your trigger wire is upright. And I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to align it and push it down. All right, there we go. And now it will fall into place. You might have to kind of work it around a little bit, but the correct position is totally flush. So you want to make sure, push your trigger slider, all right? And this whole surface needs to be flush. That's how you know it's correctly seated, all right? Your slider housing, your lever will totally be flush, okay? Now I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to put the screw, the retaining screw in. And these, again, don't have to be, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to put the screw in. These do not have to be very tight, okay, because when you are firing, the grip half will hold these screws on, so they cannot back out on you, all right? And again, you want that trigger to activate, you can hear it activating. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to hold my grip safety. All right, hammer forward so it doesn't drop on your lower. I want it to activate right in the middle of the stroke. All right, activate, a little bit of play to the upside. That's kind of the perfect position to get that cadence and that perfectly timed DT double tap. All right, now it's real simple. I'm going to go back to safe. You're going to go ahead, you're going to put your left grip cover on. And like everything, there's a trick. You want to make sure that your mode lever here is in the lower position. All right. And just like that other side, we're going to go ahead, we're going to align the dovetails. And of course, make sure your battery cap is either off or in the lower position. And this one's a little bit of a tighter fit. So same deal. I'm going to show you from this side first. You're going to put pressure down here. Make sure your mode slider is aligned to the inside of the grip when you're putting pressure. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to put that pressure down. And again, this is kind of the snag point here. You might have to put some pressure here also. But I'm going to pop that in place. It only will fit on one way. And now remember, your battery cap is also providing upward pressure on your grip halves to keep everything snug. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to put that battery cap back into place. And now we're going to do a quick function test. All right. First thing I want to do is I want to go to mechanical and make sure that my hammer drops with pressure on the trigger. I'm going to push the hammer down, make sure the disconnector hook retains it. Everything is functioning mechanically. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to go to digital. Should see a little power up light. It's only kind of visible to the user. I'm going to put the mode to pull only. All right. Trigger pull, nothing happens. That's good. Make sure you don't drop your hammer. Finger on the grip safety. Hammer will drop. All right. We're good there. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to switch that mode to pull and release. We should get a shot on pull and a shot on release. And there's your double tap. And it is timed well on this one. And a little note on practicing your double tap. Hold that hammer down to mimic the gun firing. And then you can really kind of time and understand the cadence. And that is your complete function check. All right, your DT is installed and ready to go to the range. All right, if you guys have any questions, any problems, give us a call, shoot us an email, we'll get back with you. And like I said, you can send it to us for your install, or you can get on a call with us and we can help you through the install process. Thanks a lot for being a DT customer.